So shall we proceed? Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. My name is John Blatherwick and I will be chairing this hearing today. With me are my fellow panel members, Bonnie Elk-Charon, Stan Wilder, Heather McLean, and Michael Wildman. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development in the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposal that are not related to the required variances: noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of the relief required, a recirculation of the application is required. Part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. We have, of the 11 items today, 2 sign postings that have been confirmed, so I will have to administer the oaths to 9 of the agents representing their applicants. Regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will be paused to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing of the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee, and that date will be confirmed with the coordinator. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that the committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where additional clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address for the record. We may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision and to all the parties and those who have requested it, a written decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. All decisions of the committee are subject to a 20-day appeal period, during which the decision can be appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal for a fee. Before we begin, are there any declarations of interest regarding this panel meeting or the other 2 which are being held today?
None.
None. All right, thank you. We have no minutes to confirm. I don't believe there's any adjournment requests as well. So we'll go directly to the agenda. And we will start with item 1 on the agenda, which is property known as 178 Carruthers Avenue. And I believe we have Mr. Bays, who's the applicant or the agent for the applicant.
Good morning, good day, Mr. Chair. Apologies, I had my mic silenced.
All right. Yeah, we also don't have a video of you.
Is that better?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'll have to administer the oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. All right, let's proceed. This is a application which was adjourned in February. And I assume that the site plan process is far enough along that we can deal with the variances now?
It has, Mr. Chair. There are a few very minor comments related to the civil engineering, but those are being addressed right now. They don't have any impact on the site plan.
Okay, and from February until now, there have been 2 additional variances added regarding permitting a rear balcony to project 1.8 meters into the rear yard, whereas the bylaw does not permit balconies to project into a rear yard less than 30 meters in depth, and to permit 73 square meters of amenity area to be at grade in the rear yard, whereas the bylaw requires that for the first 8 units, a minimum of 120 square meters of amenity area is required, which must be provided in the rear yard. So those are the additions from February. And overall, this application is to permit an increased building height, reduce northerly interior side yard and rear yard setbacks, and reduce rear yard area, to permit a balcony project into a rear yard, and to permit a portion of the communal amenity area to be located above grade. It is proposed to demolish the existing apartment building and construct a 4-story, 15-unit low-rise apartment building with rooftop terrace and 7 underground parking spaces. We're okay with that?
That's correct. Mr.
right.
Chair,
Please.
just like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, continue. Go ahead.
I just like to note 2 different items regarding the, or I guess 3 different items regarding the variances. One is that in discussion with city staff, specifically the planner reviewing the file, was concluded that the increase in height, which was prompted by the elevator shaft, a small vestibule at the top floor, and the stairwell, is considered a permitted projection under the zoning bylaw, and as such, a variance A is not warranted.
So we should delete variance A.
Yes. And the other item that I'd like to note is in variance B, which unfortunately I did not notice until yesterday, Mr. Chair. Otherwise, I would have informed the committee sooner. B states to permit a reduced northerly interior side yard setback. The word northerly should be struck out, as there is a proposal to reduce setbacks on both sides. I can provide a little bit more context in my presentation. However, because the building is 2 meters taller than 11 meters, that would usually increase interior side yard setbacks to 2.5 meters either side. But we are proposing 1.52 on one side, and I believe it's 1.53 on the south side. The original application I submitted did note both the minor variance for interior side yard would reference both sides.
Okay, so B should be amended to include the reduction of the southerly side yard to 1.53 meters.
That's correct.
So we'll just add that text. Any other changes or modifications?
I certainly hope not, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, if you'd like to proceed.
Certainly. Mr. Chair, I have a presentation which I submitted, which I think is coming up right now. Perfect. So, Mr. Chair, the property is known as 178 Carruthers Avenue. It's located 45 meters south of Scott Street. And Scott Street is a major arterial. I'm sure all of us are familiar with it. And with a lot of the significant changes that are occurring along this street, there's a lot of examples of high density, high rise, mixed use and residential development, which are occurring along this corridor. And most of that's been prompted by the light rail corridor that has already been extended through this section and is now being extended further west. This particular property is within a 600-meter walk of Tunney's Pasture Station. And it's in a little bit of a unique situation. And I think that it's a unique property, because of its size, because of its location relative to its context, and also I think that it provides an opportunity for a building response to its unique situation. So regarding the immediate uses right around it, directly to the north, as I said, we have Scott Street. We also have an electrical substation. It's been there for several years, and it's certainly going to be a permanent fixture in the neighborhood. You'll see 175 Carruthers across the street and to the northeast. It's currently shown as a vacant parcel, unfortunately, or we don't have recent imagery. If you could go to the next slide, it shows the significant change that's occurring on the street. This is a view from Scott Street looking south down Carruthers. The white building on the right is the subject property. I would also note that the white facade is almost directly on the property line between the substation and the subject property. The buildings on the right, as you can see, there's an 18-story residential building that's being constructed. It's actually just finishing up. And there's also been a 4-story low-rise apartment building constructed right beside it. They're all part of the same larger development, but they are two distinct buildings. And that 4-story apartment is being used in the design as a transition from the higher profile buildings on Scott Street down to the more established neighborhood to the south. South of this property, I don't have the map up now, but you have the Hintonburg community, and Hintonburg is very much a community comprised of low-rise, ground-oriented developments, dwellings on smaller lots with minimal front yard setbacks. There's a combination of detached dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, duplexes, and there's a few other low-rise apartment buildings interspersed through the community as well. To the west of the property, again, that electrical substation wraps around the rear yard of the property, the majority of the rear yard of the property. 243 and 245 Hinchy Avenue have actually been merged into one parcel now. They do abut the rear yard. However, they're subject to concurrent zoning amendment and site plan application for another 4-story low-rise apartment building that's proposed with 18 units according to the most recent site plan available on the city's DevApps site. I guess we can probably, if you could proceed to slide 3, we'll just skim through those quick, a few more images of what's occurring on the opposite side. So this property, we've seen the low-rise apartment. This is actually both the detached dwelling and this are directly opposite the proposed development site. And if we can go to the next slide, please. This shows an example, again, property on the right-hand side, view down down Carruthers into the more low-rise, ground-oriented community. There's a little bit of a swath of trees in the middle there, Mr. Chair, and that is Carruthers Sterling Park. It's a small neighborhood park. It's on a through lot, and it's about 25 meters south of the subject property. So I guess in summary, the reason why I spent so much time on context is that I really want to impart to the committee that this property is very much on the community edge, and it's also on the edge between some very intense development that is being proposed, and that's been completed along Scott Street, and the more established lower rise ground-oriented community to the south. And I think that topic, Mr. Chair, is an essential component behind the rationale for how this building was designed and the massing and layout that's been used. If you could go to the next slide, please. And I'll just, actually the next slide after this, I put the, so this has been the design response by the architect to the proposal. So it's a 4-story building. It has below grade parking for 7 parking spaces. There is limited parking that is required under the zoning bylaw for this site, despite it being in close proximity to two light rail stations. There's also balconies facing towards the front. Large windows provide passive surveillance of the street. And in total, there would be 15 apartment units in this building. If you could go to the next slide, please. So, like I mentioned, it's a low-rise apartment building, similar in massing and in massing from the street as 175 on the opposite side of the street. And the design blends the characteristics of this very intensive high-rise uses to the north and the more established lower profile buildings to the south. So there, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, there's a number of variances that are proposed. There's an interior side yard of approximately 1.5 meters. Under normals, or if this building had been 11 meters in height, it would actually conform to those two side yard setbacks. Side yard setbacks are permitted to be 1.5 meters for buildings less than 11 meters in height. In this situation, the building is 13.6 meters in height. So a little bit taller than what would be permitted for that type of interior side yard setback. And most of that is prompted because of accommodation of parking and the requirement for certain grades for parking ramps. The building also is set back from the street, allowing additional space for the landscaping at the front. And in order to improve public realm and also provide ramps for wheelchair access. This particular building has an elevator within it, which means that all floors are wheelchair accessible.
Okay.
I want to address balconies. It has been something raised by the community association, as I'm sure you've seen in the package.
Yes, we have.
Sorry?
I said, yes, we have.
Yes. So there are balconies provided for all dwelling units, or for all of the units on the property at this point in time, save for one in ground floor facing the street. What we've found, and my client's preference would be, is we recognize that balconies, that being private outdoor amenity spaces, are a desirable feature for many residents in urban areas where outdoor space of all sorts is at a premium. I'd also like to note that the distance from this property to the adjacent park is 25 meters, is almost literally across the street. Which, in my opinion, there is a benefit to making use of these areas of the public realm in order to accommodate residents. The other item, and I think one of the central concerns that was raised regarding the rear balconies, is about a loss of privacy on adjacent parcels. And I share generally the community association's concern. I think that is a relevant concern that does need to be addressed. What I would like to note about this property is, again, its unique characteristics because of its adjacent uses. So the balconies, as you can see here, Mr. Chair, face directly towards the substation lands, and the area actually due west, in this case, downwards on the plan, actually face onto an open area. They don't actually face towards the building. What we've proposed is along the south side of the balconies would have opaque glazing. And this would allow to maintain privacy in the rear yard of the detached dwelling to the south. And it would also allow a level of privacy to the proposed low-rise apartment building that would be at 243 and 245 Hinchy. That building would be proposed on the property that actually has a label of cedar hedge over it, as well as the one directly to the right of that at this point in time.
What floors are these balconies at the back on?
They would be from the second until the fourth floor, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And the Horizontal separation distance to the nearest residential property. From the
So
balcony.
from the edge of the balcony to the rear lot line, that is 2.3 meters.
I said to the nearest residential property that it's an existence.
That's a good question. It would be slightly more than that. You would want to, I don't have the exact number, Mr. Chair, but it would be from that southwest point of the balcony to the corner of the lot that has the cedar hedge label on it. I would point to it, but I'm not able to do that on here.
You've read Hindenburg's comments on the variance for the balconies.
I have, yes.
And their contention that the other low-rise apartment building, which is going to be built basically partially directly behind your property, is only putting Juliet balconies at the rear to provide residents with less of an impact from overlooking and noise. And the question, of course, is why can't you do the same?
It's an item that could be discussed. It is my client's preference to have balconies, and from my experience, both professional and my own personal experience, I've observed that most people prefer to have an outdoor private amenity area if that opportunity is available.
As long as it doesn't impact the neighbors. There's a reason why the lot depth requirement is in the zoning bylaw. 30 meters. You're awfully close to the property line. Anyway, please continue. You have a couple other variances to discuss.
So there, I think we've covered off the interior side yard setbacks. We've covered off height. We've covered off interior side yard setbacks. The reduced rear yards and reduced rear yard amenity areas, although there is a reduction in rear yard amenity area and rear yard area, the intent is to provide communal amenity areas in those rear yards. That's being addressed by providing additional amenity area on a rooftop terrace that would be available to all residents. And as well as I mentioned before, there's also a public park 25 meters to the south of the property. So, and I think, Mr. Chair, that covers off the remaining variants. I'm happy though to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the members? Mr. Wildman.
Thank you, Chair. Just maybe more for the record than anything else, but there was a comment that staff had agreed that item A could be removed. Could I get a comment from the city planner on that?
Yeah, through the chair. We had identified that the non-necessity, shall I say, of the height variance through review of the plans. And I had raised this issue to Mr. Bays last week.
Thank you. And just a question for committee staff on item B. Is there any materiality in making the change to item B that would necessitate a recirculation in the opinion of committee staff?
On behalf of staff and through you, Mr. Chair, first, are you able to hear me? I've been told I might have problems with audio.
Yes.
So the requirement is before the committee's requirement is to impose a recirculation if there is a new variance added, or if the amendment increases the extent of the variance requested. So in those case, I guess in this case, mindful of those two criteria, it may be that we're adding an additional element if it's both side yards. I'm also not sure if we're going to 1.5 from 1.2. I suppose in this instance, I'd leave it to the panel itself to determine whether this qualifies as increasing the extent of the variance requested.
Thank you. Something that I think the committee needs to discuss. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for asking the question about the balconies. I would have asked the same questions. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Mr. Wilder?
The question I have is, can staff inform us in terms of the application, the site plan for 243, 245 Hinchy, same size, same 4-story building. Are there balconies contemplated at the rear of that proposed development? Would you know, Mr. Nadeau?
Through Mr. Chair, I'm afraid not. I don't have access to that site plan information. It was my understanding that they were proposing Juliet balconies.
Okay, so that's your understanding then, is Juliet balcony. So that's just confirming what the community association has suggested is going to happen, right? All right. So I'm just wondering though, I guess they're having, and Ms. Parry doesn't deal with that, but I mean, I gather that facing Hinchy, there'll be balconies, I'm assuming for some of the units. But the rear units, as suggested by the association, I haven't seen the site plan. It will have Juliet balconies at the rear. All right.
Mr. Chair, if I can, I might be able to provide some additional information on the Hinchy property.
Please do.
So the property on Hinchy, as I mentioned, 4-story walk-up, low-rise apartment building. It actually doesn't propose any balconies on the front of the building. Now, the last iteration of the site plan that I saw posted on the DAP's website did have balconies on the rear yard, but I recognize that the site plan process is an iterative process at the city, and there may have been a change to have to remove those full balconies on the rear yard and change them for Juliet balconies. I know that Ms. Perot of the Community Association did note that in her letter. I don't have any material evidence one way or the other. I would tend to believe that her statement's accurate though.
Yeah, given this is the Hintonburg Community Association, I would agree with you. All right, so as far as the 4 tests are concerned, Mr. Bays?
So yes, in terms, I guess I can go through them on an item by item basis. The official plan generally promotes low-rise development up to 4 stories in the general urban area, which is the designation on this site. Also promotes higher densities and more intensive land uses within walking distance of transit stations and high priority transit, which Tunney's Pasture and Bayview Station on Confederation Line would certainly meet that criteria. The building is low rise. It is in a transition area between areas of high rise development. And it's my opinion that this development serves the intended purpose outlined in policies of the official plan under section 251 and 411, as well as the general urban area. The intent of the zoning is to permit low-rise apartment buildings and other similar forms of development up to 4 stories in a compact area, land use framework and massing that provides for a positive walking experience in the general urban area. The zoning in this situation is an R4S zone, which is a more intensive form of the R4 zone. And generally, if you look at the context in this site and the framework, I believe that this meets the intent and purpose of the zoning as well. This is a low-rise building, a low-rise apartment building, and it has a strong street frontage and a general massing against the public realm that is consistent with the zoning. In terms of it being not minor in nature. Again, the public realm, there are no variances proposed that would affect the public realm. The balconies and the reduction in rear yard areas at the back will mostly impact a hydro substation, which is a passive use, and it's not likely to be impacted by any type of redevelopment of that property for the foreseeable future. And then in terms of desirability, we're talking about a development that is more intensive, more efficient use of the land, will provide residential dwellings within a short walk of a transit or high priority transit and in a highly desirable neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Bays. I think what we'll do is reserve on this application. And what you will hear from us within 10 days of our decision on the matter.
Acknowledge.
Thank you very much. See you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. The next application on the agenda is items number 2 and 3, 189 Stanley. And we have on this Mr. Polton, who is the agent for the applicant. I need to administer the oath.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Sorry, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you yet.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I do not have a webcam.
Ah, okay. Audio only. All right, Mr. Polton, before we begin, I have to administer the oath regarding the following. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
All right. Got that out of the way. This application is a consent to subdivide the property into 2 separate parcels of land, proposed to construct 2 two-story long semi-detached dwellings with secondary development units with 1 new dwelling on each of the new created parcels. The existing dwelling is to be demolished. And the minor variances are to permit the construction of 2 two-story long semi-detached dwellings and to permit a porch and steps to project into the front yard in a heritage overlay zone for each of the proposed 2 long semi-detached dwellings with secondary dwelling units. So with that, we'd ask that you proceed with your application regarding the 189 Stanley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, on the line should be Murray Chown, Director of Planning at Novatech. He should be doing the presentation and answering questions for this application. As well, there should also be John Stewart. He's the architect for the owner to help design the building. He should also be available to answer any questions regarding building design and the cultural heritage impact statement. So I'm hoping they're there.
I see Mr. Chown right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I think I saw Mr. Stewart on the screen a minute ago as well. So I am confident that he is with us as well. Just 2 quick things, Mr. Chair, before I start my presentation. We reached out to committee staff earlier today, and it's our understanding that there's nobody else registered to speak on this application this afternoon. Could you confirm that?
That's, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, that's correct.
That's helpful, sir, because in that case, I will simplify my presentation. The second point, just before I get into my presentation, is that we did have an exchange of emails with the committee planner yesterday or the day before, and we've agreed that condition 5 in the report or to the committee from the planning department should not apply to this application. You may want to confirm that with the staff planner. So, Mr. Chair, what's before you today are applications for consent and applications for relief from the provisions of the heritage overlay. On the screen before you right now is a location plan for the property at 189 Stanley. It's located on the edge of the New Edinburgh community and backing onto what I believe is known as Stanley Park along the Rideau River. If I can go to the next screen, please. Slide, please. So firstly, Mr. Chairman, the applications for consent would split the existing property into two. Both of these proposed lots are fully conforming to the requirements of the bylaw in terms of lot width and lot area. There is no relief being sought with respect to the creation of the lots. We would recommend to the committee that the lots meet the criteria under Section 5124 of the Planning Act and would request that the committee approve the consent applications as filed. The development as proposed are two long semi-detached dwellings, one on each of the new lots. Those, if I can go to the next slide, please. The two long semis fully conform to the provisions of the underlying zone. So not only do the lots fully conform in terms of lot width and lot area, but the proposed buildings fully conform with respect to front yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, interior side yard setbacks, and building height. So if not for the heritage overlay, there would be no variances required for this proposed development. And Mr. Chair, members of the committee, as is the preference of the Committee of Adjustment when we're dealing with heritage overlay, in this case, the properties within the New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District, it's the preference of the committee that we go through the heritage permit process before appearing before the Committee of Adjustment on applications like this, where we're seeking relief from the heritage overlay. So, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, our application for our heritage permit was considered by the Built Heritage Subcommittee on August the 11th. We forwarded the report to Built Heritage Committee. We forwarded that report to the Committee of Adjustment earlier this week. I'm hoping the members of committee have had an opportunity to look at that report, but just quickly, I can say that heritage staff strongly endorsed this project and recommended approval to the Built Heritage Subcommittee. Also of interest, I think, to the Committee of Adjustment would be the comments from the New Edinburgh Community Alliance that are reported in the report to Built Heritage Subcommittee, where the New Edinburgh Community Alliance, quote, endorses without hesitation the most recent proposal for the redevelopment of this property. The architectural team of Ottawa Carleton Construction has done a commendable job in producing a design that respects the guidelines and directives inherent in the New Edinburgh's Heritage Conservation Plan. NECA also supports the statements contained in section 5.3 of the excellent and detailed cultural heritage impact statement prepared by Commonwealth Heritage Resources. And the positive impacts of the proposed development are outlined here in relation to the historic district's cultural heritage values. The staff report also goes on to acknowledge the comments received from Councillor King, where he states that as ward councillor, I'm aware and supportive of the new construction project. Mr. Chair, I highlight those comments because I think they're important in terms of the relief being sought from the heritage overlay in the zoning bylaw. it's clear that this development meets the purpose intent of the official plan with respect to maintaining the character of the New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District, and as that's protected in the official plan policies. It's clear that this application maintains the general purpose intent of the heritage overlay in that the proposed development maintains and respects the character of the New Edinburgh Heritage Conservation District and is supported both by staff and the community association. If I could go to the last slide in the deck, please. Sorry, yeah, thank you very much. So to the question as to whether or not the proposed development, the variances are appropriate for the development of the subject property. This panel illustrates what the two long semi-detached dwellings will look like in terms of the context on the street. They're similar scale and height to a number of the properties on the street. They are characterized by front-facing doors and porches that are typical for the Heritage Conservation District. So it's certainly our opinion that the relief being sought from the heritage overlay is appropriate for the development of the property. And then in terms of the test of minor, as the chair and members of the committee know, that generally that's understood to mean a question of impact. And once again, when you look at these images, the proposed dwellings or the proposed buildings are very much in character with the street. There's no impact in terms of height. There's no impact in terms of front yard or interior side yard setbacks. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we would encourage you to approve the applications for consent and minor variance as filed, and I would welcome any questions or comments. Thank you.
Mr. Chown, you're aware of the comments from several neighbors?
We have only seen one written comment from
Okay.
one neighbor.
All right, and
If
that would
there's
be,
if there's more than that, we haven't seen them.
well, one came in very late today, so I can understand why you wouldn't have seen it.
Would you be able to share that or inform me in terms of
Well,
what
if you have any,
concerns?
you have the correspondence from Miss McFarland, correct?
Yes, and the one we received earlier spoke to concerns about height and whether it's
Yeah.
appropriate in terms of the scale of the development. And as I said, when just looking at that last panel that we displayed for the committee, it's quite clear that the scale and height of the proposed development is very much in character with the street.
The other neighbor, Miss Cardoso, to be brief, was concerned with the character scale and massing of the of what is being proposed.
And so once again, if I can, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, the lots are fully conforming, the buildings are fully conforming with respect to all of the provisions of the zoning bylaw. So the scale and massing is very much in consistent with what's planned for the street.
Mhm.
And as to repeat myself, the street elevation, I think, clearly illustrates how the scale of these buildings and the design of the buildings is appropriate on the street. And that position is supported both by heritage staff and the committee planner.
And we understand that there's a mature tree on site which is going to be protected during the construction process,
That's correct.
and that's in discussion with forestry.
There's been several site meetings with the city forestry staff and our client's forester, and that's the reason why the westerly building has been set back much further from the street than the easterly building.
All right, I think Mr. Wilder has a question or comment.
Mr. Chown, did you happen to have a discussion with in this case, the directly abutting properties, the property, that house neck at 195 Stanley, semi at 185? Did you speak to the owners in those abutting properties?
No, our contacts have been through the community association. We did not reach out directly to any of the immediate neighbors, but we had a number of discussions and communications with the community association.
And were there changes made as a result of those discussions?
This is, there were some significant changes made, Mr. Chairman. There was, which is alluded to in the comments from NECA, there was an initial proposal, which was circulated to both the Community Association and Heritage staff. And as a result of the comments from both Heritage staff and the Community Association, we made significant changes to this project.
In terms of,
It was originally a flat roof. It was a more modern building with modern finishes. The changes are quite significant, which is why you see that reaction or response from NECA in the report to the Built Heritage Subcommittee.
so what we're doing here is fitting something into the landscape, not simply throwing it onto the landscape.
I could put it that way, Mr. Chairman.
I've
Yes.
been putting it that way for decades. All right, any other questions from the members? Okay, regarding conditions, you're aware that cash in lieu, confirmation of existing dwelling removed, services capped, independent services for severed and retained land, grading and drainage. Would staff confirm that there is no longer a need for a joint use and maintenance agreement?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the joint use maintenance agreement is not required at this time. Should
Okay.
the applicant decide to sever the property for the long semis, that's when the joint use maintenance agreement will be required.
Okay. All right, so we'll eliminate condition 5, therefore. Okay. All right, are we prepared to vote on this application? All in favor of the application for consent and variances for 189 Stanley Avenue? Your application is approved, Mr. Chown. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Have a great day.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right. Next item on the agenda will be item 4, 5 Booth Street. And Ms. Bellinger is I'm going to have to administer the oath regarding this application.
Mr. Chair, I don't see Ms. Bellinger online. I'm wondering if there's someone else speaking to the application. Or perhaps we can step it down and
Yep.
I'll contact her.
Yeah, step it down. That's fine. All right, we'll move to the next application on the agenda, which is 1309 Carling Avenue. And the agent on this would be Mr. McElligott.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Black?
Mr. McElligott is not available today, so my name is Paul Black, Senior Planner of Fulton. I'll be taking his place.
All right. I'll administer the oath
Yes, thank you.
and we'll get going. You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
I do.
All right. This is a consent application to subdivide the property into 2 separate parcels of land, proposed to construct a mixed-use building at the corner of Carling Avenue and Maryville Road. The retained lands contain the existing Westgate Shopping Center and surface parking, which is currently undergoing redevelopment. And our notice that went out talked about subdividing the property into 3 separate parcels of land, so we've corrected that. It's only 2.
Yes, that's right.
All right, if you'd like to proceed, Mr. Black.
Thank you. I will just say that I'm Jordan Trinder is here from RioCan, as well as Michael LaPrat from RLA Architecture, just in case there are questions for them, but I'll be doing most of the presentation.
Right.
I did submit a presentation, so if we can just bring that up. Thank you very much. So we can go to the next slide. So just as a bit of background for you, the Westgate Shopping Center is one of RioCan's shopping centers that they're in the process of redeveloping currently, with a mixed-use program to introduce residential and some newer retail onto some older shopping center sites across the city. So in 2017, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw applications were approved to facilitate that mixed-use redevelopment, which resulted in the creation of a secondary plan specific to the Westgate area, known as the Westgate Secondary Plan, and envisioned the building that we're talking about today. So a site plan control application was approved in 2019, which permitted a 24-story mixed-use building at the southeast corner of the site, at the corner of Maryville and Carling, which is now under construction. We can go to the next slide. So this is the approved phase 1 site plan. I apologize, I know it is difficult to see, but it's a fairly large site. And so you can see the existing shopping center, which is being retained currently in phase 1. Maryville Road is on the right-hand side, where Carling Avenue is on the south side. And the proposed building is in that southeast corner, replacing what was previously the Monkey Joe's restaurant, as well as a surface parking area. The main drive aisle off of Carling and connecting to Maryville is being retained in phase 1, as shown here, and as well as the surface parking area on the west side of that drive aisle. We can go to the next slide. Just as a bit of context, Hydro One does own a corridor through the lands, shown here in orange and blue. And RioCan has existing easements for parking previously, and now also for this current phase of development for over parts 8, 12, and 18, which are the ones highlighted in blue here, and which are part of the affected area of these applications. So those lands are not owned by RioCan and therefore don't form part of the current applications. So there are 3 consent applications. We can just jump to the next slide. So the primary consent is really to sever that to create the 2 parcels, as Mr. Chair mentioned. The phase 1 lands in the southeast corner outlined here in red, and the retained lands being the green shopping center lands outlined here in green. The total area of the severed parcels, just over 6,038 square meters, retains frontage of around 75 meters on Maryville and around 70 meters along Carling Avenue, while the retained parcel will have a total area of 30,049 square meters, with 185 meters of frontage on Maryville and 150 meters on Carling. The secondary consent application, if we jump to the next slide, is to create easements over the retained lands in favor of the severed parcels. So what's outlined as blue is the lands to be created as easements for access and servicing to serve the severed lands, which are parts 1 to 7 on this reference plan. Again, the orange is the hydro lands, where a separate easement has been established over the hydro lands for the same purposes. In this case, the total area of the easement is 1,871 square meters. And again, this will serve the severed lands for access and servicing. And then the final consent application is to create an easement over part 5, shown here, which is for catch basins and water service laterals that will cross part 5 and are in favor of the retained land, so the shopping center land. So this is part of the severed parcel in favor of the retained. Total area of, so part 5 is the easement lands in total. That's really the crux of the applications. It's essentially for financing and mortgaging purposes as the project proceeds.
I think there's some question regarding the second consent. The wording in our documents is the application indicates that parts 9 to 11, and 13 forming part of the retained lands will have frontage of 14.68 meters, an area of 1,871.21 square meters, and will be for access and maintenance agreement in favor of the severed parcel over the retained parcel. You said servicing when you were talking about this application.
Right, I may have misspoke, just. Give me a-
No, actually, it's been raised regarding condition number 4, that we actually make a modification to the application to cover the difficulties with this. So, and this thing is, we can't. I think it was what staff has said, and I'll quote: This type of acknowledges and agrees condition, which I gather would typically appear in a site plan control agreement, doesn't work well for consent applications. Conditions on consent applications need to identify a specific action to be fulfilled within 1 year time period, whereas the site plan conditions can be registered on title and apply in perpetuity. So this went to the planning department, and the planning department has come back with condition 4 and condition 5, and I read them to you. Condition 4 would be that the easement part 9, 10, 11, and 13 shall be registered for the retention and maintenance of the water services located on the retained parcel to the benefit of the severed parcel, to the satisfaction of the general manager, planning, infrastructure, and economic development, or his/her designate. And number 5 reads that the owner or owners provide a site servicing plan or other evidence to satisfaction of the general manager, planning, infrastructure, and economic development department, or his/her designate, to be confirmed in writing from the department to the committee, showing water services and metering designed in accordance with city standards and to the city's satisfaction. So it's a clarification.
Yes, and I did receive that just before the hearing, those revised conditions.
So that'll be and the other conditions, of course, building code services, spatial separation analysis of south elevation conforming to the building code. And from the planning department, the joint use and maintenance agreement, independent services for both retained and severed parcels, obtain Ontario Ministry of the Environment and Energy approval for the stormwater. And then we've added modifications to what was the original number 4 to be as the amended 4 and 5.
Right.
Any questions from the other members regarding these consent applications? Or are we all in favor of granting the consent subject to the modification to the conditions? All right. Your consents are granted, Mr. Black.
Thank you very much.
With those amendments.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have Jake Reddy, who would be speaking to the application for 5 Booth, is online now.
Okay. Okay. We'll move back to item 4 on the agenda, which is 5 Booth Street. Mr. Reddy, I need to administer the oath to you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
All right. This application is a consent to subdivide the property into 2 separate parcels of land in order to create a parcel of land for a portion of the equipment for a utility system that will service the ZB Ontario lands. The subject lands will be conveyed to the owner operator of the thermal system, being ZB Community Utility.
Correct.
All right. I believe Ms. McLean has a question regarding this or comments? McLean?
Mr. Reddy, I wondered if the land is to be conveyed to the Zibi Community Utility. Are they abutting landowners?
No, so they are, well, they will be at some point, but what they are is a private utility servicer. They're going to be providing a district thermal system to the entire Zibi project. But what we need is a separate piece of property or parcel of land that we can call the dominant tenement to provide them with easements over each building block so that they can provide with easements for the district thermal system. So they are currently not an abutting landowner.
So the conveyance would be once a conveyance, always a conveyance. So it would be able to, I'm just wondering if we should be putting a restriction on this conveyance so that it's not conveyable in the future.
It won't be conveyed in the future. It will be one conveyance to Zibi Community Village or Zibi Community Utility at this time in order to provide a dominant tenement to all future development blocks, as they will be providing the private utility services for the entire Zibi Ontario lands. And the private services were contemplated in the master site plan agreement as well. So that's not anything that should be coming as a surprise to either the city or the committee today.
So it's a parcel of land that we're creating that will be owned by somebody different, somebody that won't have any abutting lands. Am I right on that?
Correct.
So it would be conveyable in the future without another consent.
It would be, yes. But there is no intention to convey it to a separate third party.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Does that satisfy you, Ms. McLean? Or do we still have an issue with this?
Mr. Chair, I just wondered whether or not Section 5012, which is a restriction, should be put on this, but it would not be possible to impose it as the purchaser does not own abutting land. So we'll just have to take it at face value then.
Okay. All right. Any of the other members of the committee have a question regarding this consent application? All right. With that clarification, are we prepared to grant this application? All in favor? All right, Mr. Reddy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mr. Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Just an item that's been raised. It appears that we did have a speaker for the 178 Carruthers application, who unfortunately didn't get the opportunity to speak. I understand that the committee reserved on that item.
Yeah.
I believe the applicant is still online, but wanted to just raise that for the committee's consideration and attention.
Okay. That was my mistake. And I believe.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, the applicant actually is no longer online.
Okay.
Yes, I'm back online.
Well, Ms. Parrott, we've already reserved on this application, and the agent is no longer online. So I don't think we can actually proceed with hearing you out on this unless it's still in session on this particular item. However, we do have. We have your letter from that you sent to us from the Hindenburg Community Association, and we have duly considered it, and we have reserved we have reserved on this application.
Can I just make one comment? We would like to see it recirculated because of the southerly side yard addition. That's the only comment I would like to make.
Right, and we have to actually discuss whether or not we need to get a recirculation because we've added to the variance, as you know.
Yeah,
So that's,
thank you.
part of the reason, that's part of the reason why we reserved on this.
Great, thank you.
And that was my mistake, and I'm sorry, I'm old and I can't read.
No problem.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. All right. The next application, it's before us, will be for 210 Cowley Avenue. And I believe the agent is Mr. Robinson. There we go. Mr. Robinson.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Paul Robinson here on behalf of the owner.
And your address, please.
100 Palomino Drive, Kanata.
Thank you. We're going to have to administer the oath before we enter in discussion.
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
All right, thank you. This application, where are we? Is for, well, if you'd like to proceed, Mr. Robinson, on Cowley.
Sure. I have there's a presentation materials that I provided.
Mhm. So this is minor variances produce reduced lot areas and lot widths for the construction of a new semi-detached dwelling. And that's the only variances applied for.
That is correct. So this is for lot width and lot area. The required lot width for a semi in this zone is 9 meters. The proposal is for 7.62 meters for each side. That reflects the existing lot width. The required lot area is 270 square meters, and the two individual sides of the semi would have lot areas basically 232 square meters each. This is the existing property. It's the white vinyl sided house with the peaked roof. So this is on the west side of Cowley in the Champlain Park neighborhood. Could you go to the next slide, please? This is the existing property is on the left. There is another single family home to the right. Next, please. This is a photo taken in the rear yard just a couple of weeks ago, showing the rear of the existing house. Next, please. This is a semi that is on the same block of Cowley on the east side that in 2019 was before the committee for basically the exact same variances as are being applied for here in terms of lot width and lot area. And I believe either 2 or 4 weeks ago, this same application was before you for the severance of the property. So the proposal that we're going for is for the exact same lot width and lot area variances as this similar application was on the same block on Cowley. Next, please. This is taken from the city's mapping website. I've marked out on the left-hand side where the R1 zone is, and on the right-hand side, the R2. The subject property is in black, and it is in the R2 zone. I've put square boxes around all the other semis that are in the R2 zone on this area north of Scott Street. And then the properties that have got the asterisk within them are semis that have got reduced lot width less than 9 meters. So all of those would also require a similar variance to what we're asking for. Mm-hmm. On the same block on Cowley, we've got semis, 2 sets of semis to the north of us. On the same side, we've got 3 sets of semis on the east side to the north of us. And then on the other side of the road, there is a semi at the corner of Sunny Sunnymead and Cowley, and one of those two semis is also less than 9 meters in frontage. So the area, as I'm sure you're aware, there's many applications. There have been many applications before the committee for semis, and many of them have required a reduced lot width and lot area. Next, please. On the left is the survey plan that shows the existing single-family home that's on the property and shows little parts of the properties on either side. To the south, which is on the left-hand side of the survey plan, and the site plan, which is on the right-hand side, there is a carport of a home that is at 214 Cowley. Then on the right, there is a 2.5-story home, and that was shown in one of the photos. The setbacks to the existing homes, to the south, the setback of the carport to the lot line is, I think, about 0.43 of a meter, and it is got just in excess of 3.5 meters, I believe, to the house itself. And then on the north side, there's a similar approximately 3.5 or 3.6 meter setback from the lot line to the 2.5-story building. The property, the site plan is shown here on the right-hand side, is compliant in all other zoning regulations such as front yard setback, side yard setback, rear yard setback, and building height. So it's just the required lot width and lot area variances that we're requesting. Next, please. On the left is the basement plan for both of the units. On the right is the ground floor plan. So it's a single car garage for each. Next, please. And then on the left is the second floor plan, and on the right is the roof plan. And I think that is the extent of the materials. So we've, as indicated,
no elevations?
I'm sorry? Oh, maybe there, yes, maybe there were, I'm sorry. They were submitted. Sorry, yes. There's the front elevation at the top. So single car garage and the driveways in the middle. And then the elevation diagram at the bottom would be on the north side. Next, please. The top drawing is the rear elevation, and then the bottom drawing is the south side elevation.
How high are those the balconies at the rear above grade?
They are, well, as you can see, it's the basement level, and I believe it is. I believe it's about 3 meters above the basement slab, and it's about, I think it's about 1 foot or 1 foot, 1.5 feet above the foundation. So I think that'd be about half a meter.
And how far to is that balcony construction?
I believe they are 2 meter projections, and that is the maximum that's permitted.
Okay. And the distance from these balconies to the nearest residential property to the rear is,
oh wow,
what I see on the map is significant.
I'm sorry?
So what I see on the map here, there'd be a fairly significant distance.
Yes, the rear yard setback is about 8.53 meters. So from the closest point of the balcony to the rear lot line would be about 6.53. I would estimate it's going to be probably at least the same again to any properties behind.
All right. Any concerns raised by neighbors regarding the above grade balcony off the main living area at the rear?
No, the plans have been shown to both immediate neighbors. We prepared a sort of a submission package and delivered that to nearby neighbors. And as well, I believe the community association, who've been quite active in this, they posted the drawings on their website, and they've reviewed the drawings as well.
Okay. Okay. Any questions from the other members of the committee to Mr. Robinson? I believe we have Ms. Pearl and Ms. Bankier who wish to speak to this application. I see Ms. Pearl is on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Certainly can.
Okay, great. I do not know why my webcam is not working. I am sorry. Okay, I just want to,
For the record, Ms. Pearl, your address?
oh, sorry. I'm Heather Pearl, co-chair of the Champlain Park Community Association. I'm at 251 Keyworth Avenue in Champlain Park.
Okay.
Okay, and I just want to highlight that you and the applicants have our submission with the attachments, the builder code of conduct for our community, the infill tree conservation program, building and renovating in a mature neighborhood. So I don't have to go into that. You have it.
Yes, we do.
So we truly appreciate the collaborative approach that has been taken by Ever Home Construction and by PH Robinson, their agent. This has been really a good consultative process. They contacted us back in February to discuss the proposal. They made some changes as the result of the discussion. We assisted in distributing their notice to the 60-meter circle neighbors so that the neighbors could be informed. We have put the information on our website. And I know that they have also spoken to the neighbors directly, and they've said that they will continue to try to do so. So this is the way it should work. We really like this. And
any concerns regarding the above grade projection in the rear yard and privacy and
there actually were some concerns initially, but they are allowed the 2 meters. And we were able to speak to the neighbors, and we outline, when we talk to neighbors, we say, this is what the bylaw allows. This is what you can do. If there's an issue with privacy, they actually have moved the projection. They actually reduced the size of the projection based on our discussions with them. From the abutting rear yard, that lot is 200 feet deep. They are nowhere near, they will not be causing a problem with privacy there. So, and this lot also slopes down quite a bit. It's quite steep in the backyard. So I don't see how they could have any kind of if they wanted a deck off the main floor, then they can't have one that isn't up higher. But it is on a par with the 2 abutting properties. So, I mean, we see no problem with it. The abutting property owners do not seem to have a problem with it.
the abutting property owners have rear decks on the second floor as well?
Let's see, the large single family home actually walks right out onto his backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And that there's quite a grade change between that property and this subject property.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there'll be an issue at all. And the other property owner has a deck that goes off the rear. And as I said, this area has a fairly significant grade change. So there should not be, they're not complaining about it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, and so basically this allows us to leave sufficient space for tree planting, for green space, extremely important in this community that saw flooding in 2019, and not only flooding at our lower northern end, but basement in the neighborhood, including new semis, were subjected to overland flooding because the storm sewers were just overwhelmed. So it's really important for us to have the green space and the gardens, which are characteristic of this community. We basically suggests that the owner contact the abutting neighbor to the north to discuss and determine if there's a need to prune overhanging branches from the distinctive oak tree. The possibility exists that they might have to, maybe they won't, but they should be just in discussion with them. The driveway and carport on the property to the south need protection because they are on the property line pretty much. The carport is set in just slightly. The driveway is right to the property line. This is an older house, and the old houses in our neighborhood tended to be built in the center of the lots at a time when people didn't necessarily have cars. So they don't have a lot of space on either side to set in their garages and everything. So so basically just make sure that the excavation and the construction activities do not compromise that person's driveway. And beyond that, we look forward to hearing from our neighbors that their relationships with Ever Home Construction are as positive as the one that we've had to date with them and with Mr. Robinson. So that is our big thing. Be nice to the neighbors from now on and we'll be happy.
Thank you, Ms. Pearl.
Okie dokie.
Your input.
Thank you.
All right. I note that there are no conditions requested by the city. Building code services, standard stuff, obtained permits primary or prior to demolition and proposed construction. And Hydros talks about its safety offset clearances, which I'm sure you're aware of. Mr. Robinson, would your applicant be conducive to adding a condition that this consent would be and variance would be approved subject and tied to the plans filed?
That works.
Okay. All the members of the committee okay with that? We'll tie this approval to the plans filed. All right. Are we all in favor? All right. Good luck with your project, Mr. Robinson. Thanks very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh, where are we now? The next application is for 71 William Street, and we do not need an oath for this one. I believe it's Ms. Tam who is going to be presenting on this.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
So for the record, it's Edith Tam. I'm the agent for Bank of Nova Scotia.
Okay, and your address, ma'am?
20 Norris Street in Ottawa.
Okay. This is a consent for an encroachment and maintenance agreement on 71 William Street, owned by Archmore Limited, in favor of 117, 119 Rideau Street in perpetuity, which is a newly constructed Bank of Nova Scotia building, and also the location of the city's Rideau East Light Rapid Transit Station. So if you'd like to explain what you're requesting in your consent.
Just for the record, actually, I neglected to do a presentation for this. So I'm just wondering to the chair if it's possible for the coordinator. Oh, there it is. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And when you want to change the slide, just say, please can't change to the next slide.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I also should have Robin Suchin on the line. He's the project manager for the real estate and LRT project that we had going on. So this application is for an encroachment and maintenance agreement. So what you see highlighted on the screen, that image, that is a snow catcher. So when the Bank of Nova Scotia was constructed, it was determined by engineers that snow falling might potentially land on the neighbor's building at 71 William Street. So they recommended that we construct a snow catcher as part of the Bank of Nova Scotia building. And so what you see there is hanging over 71 William Street. It was not supposed to be this design at first, but this is what the engineers had recommended. So here it is. It's a permanent structure, and what we are asking the Committee of Adjustment right now is for an encroachment and maintenance agreement in favor of the Bank of Nova Scotia so that they can go and check in on it and maintain it if ever needed. And we need that on title in perpetuity. So the LRT opened back on September 13th, 2019. And we have an agreement, like a current agreement, encroachment agreement on title right now, but it's only temporary. And this was negotiated between our lawyers, our legal counsel, the owner of 71 Archmore, as well as Bank of Nova Scotia, that this would be a temporary agreement on title and that we, the city, would act on behalf of Bank of Nova Scotia in seeking the consent of the Committee of Adjustment within 1 year. So this is why I'm here right now. Also, the snow catcher, oh shoot, just looking at my notes here. Yeah, so it's a temporary agreement right now, but as soon as the Committee of Adjustment grants their consent, this temporary easement will fall off the title and we will register a new substitute agreement, which is basically the same terms and conditions as the one before. And we also signed a side letter with between the city and the Bank of Nova Scotia, saying that we would be continuing with this process and seeking consent. I've included the R plan. It's a stratified R plan showing the snow catcher, and that's captured on 4R31550. I don't believe it's in as a part of this document, unfortunately, but it is part 14 of diagram D of the R plan that I have included in my application. Aside from that, I believe that's it.
I'm just looking at your letter dated July 9th,
Yes.
2020.
Yes.
And the second paragraph, I'm a little curious. States, during construction of the LRT station, the city indirectly altered the design of the Bank of Nova Scotia building. Could you please explain how do you indirectly alter the design of a building?
I'm going to let Robin Sushin address that if possible.
The design of the bank building, the bank was not supposed to be there originally. It became very costly for the city to expropriate the bank. So in exchange of removing the bank, we rebuilt the bank, which required us to bring up exhaust vents through the bank, acting like a chimney. We had originally thought in the designs that we could just run them straight up vertically. Our engineers were worried with smoke dispersion and the adjoining condo to the east. So they suggested that the vents actually get bent to do an elbow and vent out into the William Street right of way. So as a result, the vent shafts, as they passed through the bank building, increased in height. And because of that increase in height of approximately 2 meters, it created an issue with snow loading and drifting. And as a result, bylaw or building code services said you're going to have to address the issue of snow drifting. So we had to look at what we had designed. We couldn't amend the design. So as a result, we fell back to building the snow catcher.
Okay.
So if you look at the original, the first picture there, you can see how the building vents face William Street rather than straight up into the air.
Yeah, I can see that. Okay. This is to us a stratified easement, and this committee has struggled with stratified easements in the past. I think Ms. McLean had some questions or comments on this application.
I'm just concerned about the committee's powers to grant a stratified easement. I think the Planning Act limits our consent authority to the subdivision criteria, and that's dealing with the subdivision of land. So I'm not at all clear on how the committee can deal with severances of space.
Okay, to the chair and the members of committee, I was only made aware of this a couple of days ago by the city planner, and she has actually reached out to legal counsel and obtained an opinion from them. I would ask the city staff or city planner respond to this question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. I had asked the legal department to provide sort of an opinion or clarification with regards to that, and I will pass this to Mr. Garrett Froome, who is here, so he can clarify regarding the whether or not the committee has jurisdiction over stratified easements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the member's question, my opinion is that the committee does in fact have the jurisdiction to grant stratified easements and in fact stratified segments of parcels of land. The question is a good one, however, because it's correct that the Planning Act doesn't specifically address either for or against the idea of stratified or horizontal segments of land being divided. However, I think at common law, the idea of what constitutes land is a bit broader than the sort of common sense definition of land as, you know, soil. It's a bundle of rights which include air rights and subsurface rights. And if you have a fee simple ownership in land, you generally have all of those rights. And prior to legislation which restricted the ability of landowners to alienate some of those rights, so by subdividing a parcel themselves, the common law generally let people do that. Now that we have modern planning legislation, I think the intent was to continue that common law right, subject to the approval of the committee. So there are other precedents for other municipalities doing similar similar things. In my memo that I provided to Ms. Carvajal, there were two examples, at least in Toronto, where similar stratified easements had been awarded. And in one of those cases, it was actually a stratified parcel as well. So in my opinion, in brief, the committee does in fact have the authority to issue this type of severance.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Schrom. Any other members have questions regarding this consent application? Ms. McLean, any further comments? You're muted. I can't hear you, Ms. McLean, you're muted.
Here, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I just got the memo from legal this morning, and I didn't see if there were any attachments to it, but my understanding at the very least is that in Toronto, any stratification has to have land connected to it. I may misunderstand that, but that's my understanding. And again, I think the committee's mandate is to the subdivision criteria in 5124. So a question to planning. Would you do this stratified easement, or are you aware of a stratified easement through the plan of subdivision process?
I would say unless it's like a condominium, that's the only one that I'm aware of. If you are asking whether or not the committee had previously granted stratified easements, I believe there was an application coming in for 330 Preston Avenue that requested a similar request within stratified easement for certain parts for the development of a high-rise building.
So, so if the committee were to find that a plan of subdivision is necessary in this case, I guess the question is, would the applicant be successful in getting a stratified easement through a plan of subdivision? And I know that that may be a rhetorical question, so I'm just going to leave that out there. But on the, my recollection is on the Sacto severances back at Preston Street, the legal opinion at the time was that it could be supported because it was tied to land. And it was specifically, the opinion was given specifically on that basis and was not to be used in general for other applications. So I'm just going to leave that comment out there on that. Thank you.
Mr. Wilder. You're muted. There you go.
Sharon, can you said you've got some examples. I was involved with the committee when we dealt with the application over on Preston Street. We dealt with Mr. Alan Cohn at the time. We discussed this at length, but we believe it was actually in the end tied to land. You mentioned you had some other examples. Do you have any other examples besides the Preston application, which you probably looked at?
Mr. Chair, in response to the question, I don't have other examples besides the Preston application, and I did look at 2 examples in Toronto that I was able to find through research. So those are obviously a different municipality and slightly different context, but my opinion is primarily based on the reading of the legislation.
Right.
I just want to so
anything further, Mr. Wilder?
Yes, just to pursue that then, those examples you saw in Toronto, again, those came up when we were discussing Preston Street. Were those examples you saw in Toronto tied to land as well?
The easements, I'd have to look in more detail at the specific drawings because I'm not sure I considered the issue of whether they were floating in air, I guess you could say, or above, not exactly tied to land. I assume that's what you're referring to when you're saying tied to land. And I don't have a better way to describe it. So I would have to look at those in more detail because I didn't look for that specific issue.
Anything further, Mr. Wilder? Do any other members have any questions, comments regarding this application? No? I think what we'll do, folks, is reserve on this, and you'll receive the committee's decision within 10 days of our decision being made. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
The next application we'll deal with today is number 8 on the agenda. And that's 36-7. And I believe Mr. or Ms. Blakely is the agent. You're there. Hi there. This application is a minor variance to permit a reduced corner side yard setback. It is proposed to demolish the existing dwelling and to construct a 2-story single detached dwelling. So if you'd like to proceed with your presentation, Ms. Blakely.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. She has a sworn oath.
Pardon me?
A sworn oath is required.
Okay, I'm sorry. I forgot. All right, we have to administer the oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
Okay, if you would like to proceed then, please, with your application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's Kayla Blakely. I'm a planner with Novatech, representing the owner owner of 36 Southern, and I'm joined as well as the owner's building designer Andre Godin.
Okay.
So I see the presentation slides are up, so I can give a brief overview of the application.
That's fine. Please proceed.
So the purpose of this minor variance application is to request relief with regard to a reduced corner side yard setback for a proposed detached dwelling. So you can see the subject properties highlighted on the screen there. It's on the southeast side of the Southern and Bristol Ave intersection. The property was developed in the mid 1950s with a detached dwelling as well as a detached garage in the rear yard. If we flip through the next couple slides, that's a photo. There was a photo of the subject property, and then the survey plan, and that just shows the subject property in relation to its neighbors. Much of the neighborhood is characterized by similar 1 to 2 story detached dwellings. So we can flip to the site plan. So the owners wish to replace the existing detached dwelling on the property with a new 2-story detached dwelling with a single car garage. So the proposed dwelling would generally maintain the same setbacks as the existing dwelling and proposes to relocate the garage from the rear yard to the side yard with a new access from Southern. It's intended to maintain all of the existing trees where possible, including some city-owned trees along the streets. So the proposal requires variance to permit a reduced side yard setback of 1.2 meters, whereas the bylaw requires 3 meters. So that's the setback in relation to Bristol Avenue. If we flip through the next few slides, I believe it's just the building drawings that were submitted with the application. And if we go to the west elevation, a couple more. If you go one back, perfect. So that's to Bristol Avenue, the corner side yard. So the requested variance is in relation to a portion of the dwelling, kind of the front portion, whereas where you see the cladding swishes to like a block, that's actually the building is cut back and is set back the required 3 meters at that point. So that the requested variance is very much in keeping with what's existing at this time. If we flip through the next few slides, it should show the existing dwelling kind of as it's set within the property. And then one more slide. If you could just flip one more, perfect. So that just illustrates the existing corner yard context at this time. And you can see that there's the abutting dwelling to the south on Bristol, which is actually set much closer to the street. And that is the only other dwelling on that block on the same side of the street. So in general, it's maintaining the setback as the current dwelling is very much in keeping with the kind of character of the street. And if you flip to the next slide, there should be that just kind of illustrates the lot fabric. The line in black is the proposed building footprint for the new dwelling. You can see looking along Bristol Avenue, the dwellings are generally set fairly close to the street. It would be noted that the existing dwelling was constructed some time ago at 1.2 meters. So the owners could reconstruct at that setback However, they prefer to extend the building wall towards the rear lot line, relocate the garage to the side of the dwelling, so that just increases the depth of the dwelling somewhat. Therefore, the variance is required. But based on the kind of existing context of or condition of the property, as well as the surrounding context, we feel the 1.2 meters is appropriate, and is very much in keeping with the street and will not impact any adjacent properties.
Okay. Any of the members have any questions or comments regarding this application? You're aware, Blake?
Mr. Chair, just a question on,
Okay.
understood what the consultant said about the maintaining the same basic building sideline setback. Does anybody either from planning staff know why the right of way is a little wider along that side of the road? You can see where it jogs back as you move further backwards. Does planning staff have any feedback on why that is the case?
Through Mr. Chair. I'm afraid not. I did take note of this variance in the right of way, surveyed the area, but it is not apparent to me why this was done.
Okay, thank you. And the tree that the comment was on, is that the one and only that we saw on the plan view that was up on the screen a minute ago, or is it more one of the trees that we see on the legal plan that was provided? Can somebody point that out to me?
I believe the legal plan would be better for reviewing this. There are 2 trees noted on it.
Does committee staff have that plan? Yes, thank you. So would it be the one up at the corner of the 2 lot lines as they intersect? Is that the one? Or is it further down?
It would be further to the right on this plan. So there are 2 trees visible in the Google Street View. There's one that is just to our left of this footpath that's evident. That has a diameter of roughly 25 centimeters. And if we go to the right of the footpath, further east on this plan, there's a tree that's 30 centimeters that appears to be aligned with where the proposed driveway would be. And it's my understanding that that is the source of forestry's concerns here.
Okay, and is there any more feedback on what that concern is? It's a bit of it's a comment, but it doesn't really tell us what the desired outcome is. Has staff had any discussion with forestry on, or the proponent on what's going to happen there?
I have not had any back and forth with forestry. I believe it's up to the proponent to provide a solution that's satisfactory to forestry department in terms of any proposals affecting that street on tree.
Ms. Blakely, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I can certainly speak a bit more to that. If there was a slide, page 16, if we could flip to that, that shows the street view and the existing street trees. Get there. Yes, perfect. So this photo shows, you can see there's 4 existing city-owned trees along both streets. So the red maple that's kind of shown in the background is where it does conflict with the proposed driveway. The other 3 trees are intended to remain. We were made aware of forestry's comments, and the owners have yet to submit a building permit application. So the typical tree disclosure report, as well as any discussions with the city on the removal and any compensation will take place as part of that process. And the owners they intend to preserve all trees where they can. It was a bit difficult to accommodate a driveway or to shift the driveway where it could result in that maple being retained. As you see, there's the bump out at the intersection, as well as a city infrastructure. There's a catch basin. And then there's the hydro overhead wires at the rear, which have clearance requirements. So those kind of came into play and really require the driveway to be shifted, I guess, to maximize the distance from intersection from a safety perspective, as well as to avoid conflict with the wires and the bump out. So it seems like the discussions with forestry will have to take place.
Okay, thank you. Given that the tree has really nothing to do with the relief being sought, I don't see an issue for this committee.
Not until we have a tree bylaw.
And then you know, in light of the fact that we're really sort of maintaining what generally is out there, and that section of the road is wider, or the right of way rather is wider, I don't really have any further concerns. Thank you for answering the question.
Any of the members have any further comments? No.
Mr. Chair, we do have a speaker for this file. She's on the phone.
Yeah. Yes. Miss Biesterfeld, I believe. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, my name is Maggie Asher Biesterfeld.
Hi.
I'm at number 40 Southern Drive.
Okay. And your comments.
Okay. Yes, thank you for this opportunity to address your Committee of Adjustments. I was born and raised in Old Ottawa South, and I've lived in my beautiful home on Southern Drive here for 40 years. And other neighbors have been here even longer. 36 Southern will be the first home on our street to be demolished. All our homes were built at the same time with quality and care, and a tree planted in the front yard. It is with great dismay that we watch the destruction of our once beautiful city, although I was very pleased to hear your concerns about that beautiful red maple in the front yard, and also that other trees, there's going to be further discussion to preserve those. So why do we have bylaws? I have been calling my counselor for months now to ask this question, but they never get back to me. I believe our bylaws are for protection, to protect our neighborhoods and to preserve the peace and tranquility of the people who live there. We should not have to endure the years of incredible noise, dirt, traffic, machines, vibrations, etc., that demolition and construction gives us. We are an established neighborhood. When the construction is finally finished, we are faced with the loss of views, privacy, sun, light, and shade. And then we have to pay for it with our taxes going up. How is that right or fair? Are you hearing me okay?
Oh, yes.
Our City of Ottawa bylaws need to be respected and enforced. Monster homes and destruction of the green space, flowers, and trees on the properties need to stop immediately. All these variances granted by you are destroying our neighborhoods and causing friction between neighbors. How did all these teardowns of solid, well-built, pretty homes get started? And don't say intensification. 2 middle-class residents die or move out and 2 other people move in and spread out. And so how is that intensification? I can understand if a house is derelict. Occasionally, there is no hope and it must come down. But that's not the case for these homes in Old Ottawa South, Old Ottawa East, the Glebe, and Westboro. We in particular are under attack, but I assume the problem is citywide. My previous letter to you comments on climate change / global warming caused by destruction of the rainforest and how our urban tree canopy here in Ottawa is at critical low levels. The federal government is finally going to focus on a green recovery, quote unquote. It's time for the municipal government to do the same by preserving mature trees. The sticks we are planting either die or take decades to give us any benefit. In conclusion, I would like to quote the Nature Conservancy that says, memories are forever and nature should be too. So I would like to just comment that I was glad that you spoke about the trees because that is really the heart of our Old Ottawa South neighborhood. Thank you.
And unfortunately, at this time, the city's new tree bylaw is not in force and or effect. By this time next year, I would imagine it will be.
But even when it is in effect, sir, they just pay a few extra dollars and they cut the trees down anyway.
Well, that's the tree protection protocol that's in place right now for anything over 50.
Well, it's not really protecting the trees. It's just adding that they have to pay extra money, which they do.
Yep, to take down a distinctive tree. I'm well aware of it. I live in a neighborhood where this is happening on a regular basis.
It's heartbreaking, sir.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and unfortunately, the committee does not have authority over trees at this point.
Along the Bristol Avenue, where your variance is that you're deciding on, I do believe I heard the lady say that the trees along there will be protected.
Yep.
That's the plan.
There's no intent to remove any of those at all.
Of those trees, yes.
Just the one in the front by the driveway, I guess, is going to have to go.
Yes, that beautiful red maple that shades my home.
Yeah, well. Yeah. And quite frankly, as a property owner, you and I both have the right to apply for exactly this kind of relief from the bylaw and build that kind of a house in our neighborhood. It's you are allowed to do that under the various acts and bylaws of this city. So it's I understand your concern with the change on your street being the first house to change, but I've lived in my neighborhood for almost 40 years, and I can walk you around and show you almost 50 lots that have changed from single family dwellings to semis on 50s since 1982. So.
Well, the same in Old Ottawa South and along the canal. You know, it's a construction zone in here.
Yeah, we have a new official plan, and I would definitely talk to your counselor about that, because maybe we need to change certain aspects of what we consider to be appropriate intensification. However, that's not what's before the committee today. Today, we're looking simply at a reduction in the corner side yard to 1.2 meters from the required 3 meters.
I understand that, but I appreciate the opportunity to express my views.
And you have the right to express your views as a property owner. Anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
So will the forestry people be? Is there some kind of forum to speak with them as well?
Ms. Blakely, perhaps you can talk to the agent. I think you should talk to the agent and or the owner regarding this. They're going to have to talk to forestry. I'm quite frankly surprised that forestry didn't request that the tree be salvaged in some way, but that's forestry. That's not the Committee of Adjustment. And
well, I do believe it hasn't gone to forestry yet.
They've commented that the proposed plan will have a negative impact on city-owned trees located at the front. That's all I have said.
Oh, chopping down is pretty negative.
Yep. Anyway, I'd if you're concerned, I'd call the forestry department and ask for some answers. And the property owner's agent is going to, I guess, have to enter into discussions with the forestry department regarding this tree as well. But it's not a distinctive tree because it's not 50 centimeters, so there won't be a tree removal permit needed at this point.
Even though it's on city property.
Well, it's up to the city. If they say you can take our tree down, that's not before this committee, that's the forestry department.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Any other comments from the committee on this application? Ms. Oakesharon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to thank Ms. Biesterfeld for calling in and sharing her thoughts, because they are very thoughtful and definitely will be considered for this decision and decisions that are made in the future by this committee, I believe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we prepared to vote on this application, or are we going to reserve? Anyone wish to reserve on this application of the members?
Reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to vote now, but I'm in the hands of the balance of committee.
Yeah.
Mr. Wilder? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm willing to vote now. I appreciate the neighbors' concerns. And as you know, I'm on the advise at the I guess the committee looking at the tree bylaw, and I had hoped it would have been in place by now, but due to COVID, there's been delays, partial delays. Any case, I'm prepared to vote now on the variance. I'm afraid maybe discussions with the owner, if the neighbor has a concern, maybe there's some way to salvage that tree, but it's beyond our ability to deal with the tree, unfortunately. So I'm prepared to deal with the application now. So take a vote.
Ms. McLean, you ready to vote?
Yes.
Ms.
Mr.
Oakeshott?
Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mignon has his hand up to speak.
Mignon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to add a couple of things to this discussion with respect to the tree and constraints on the property. And I'd like to draw your attention. You have some comments there from Ottawa Hydro with respect to distances that have to be met in the rear yard because there's an overhead power line. And perhaps we could just flip to Kayla. Perhaps you could advise the coordinator to show the slide with the red outline of our building.
Yes, that would have been a separate submission that we provided, hoping that it was received.
That's the one. Okay. So it's pretty hard to see at this scale, I think, but so Hydro had made comments, as you know, there are requirements for setbacks from hydro lines. There is a hydro pole line that runs along the rear lot line that's at the south of the property. And the pole line is probably about half a meter north of the rear lot line, and contains contains a primary line, which requires a 5-meter offset, which we've drawn on the drawing. You can see in a dashed line. And there's also a secondary line that I guess serves the property to the east, I'm not sure, that also requires a setback. The effect of which is that the existing garage in the rear yard is non-complying, and one could not construct a garage in that area, nor any building. So it pretty much forces one to take access off Southern. And then when we look at Southern, you can see in this drawing quite clearly the bump out, and you saw from the photographs, really prevent you from putting a driveway on the west side of Southern, close to the intersection. You're pretty much forced to the east side. So I guess by process of elimination, this seems like the best spot to locate the driveway, perhaps the only spot that's available. And the other thing I'd note is that there's several trees along the street frontages that are on city property. And our clients are doing their best to preserve all of them, but they do have to sacrifice one. Now, the city, as part of the building permit application on this, will be requesting compensation for this tree, financial compensation, which will be paid, and they put into a fund that they use for planting trees. So that's just a little explanation there of why we're at where we're at. And I appreciate the concern about trees. It doesn't matter whether 20, 30, 50 centimeters. The fact that it's not distinctive, still our client would have liked to have kept it if they could, but they can't.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mignon, but are there not restrictions on in the encroach regarding private approaches and setbacks from an intersection, which would prevent you from building a driveway on the left-hand side of your building or the right-hand side of the building?
That is correct. Yes, there are.
It has to go on the other side because it's not allowed on that side.
Yeah.
It's too close to the intersection.
Yep.
Okay. All right, I'm prepared to render a decision on this application as well, which is to reduce a corner side yard setback from the 3 meter requirement to 1.2 meters. All in favor of the application? The application is approved. Good luck with your project. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next application that is before us today is 2 Middleton. And we have to do the oath again. I believe it's Ms. Thompson who's the applicant.
Hello?
Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
I can see half your head.
I'll work on it. Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay,
That's all of me.
You're all there now. Okay, I have to administer the oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. This application is for minor variances to permit a reduced front yard and rear yard setback, a reduced rear yard area, and to permit increased projections for the construction of new 2-story additions at the front and rear of the existing dwelling. If you'd like to proceed with your application.
Okay, if presentation come up. I'm beginning with a survey showing the existing conditions. The house was built about 100 years ago, and it has a 1-story glassed unheated porch at both the front and the back of the building. That is currently, the front porch is almost at the property line and projects past the corner of the house into a driveway space.
Okay.
And at the back, there's the 1-story addition is also fairly close to the property line and then has steps that are right out to the property line. We propose to demolish both of those and replace them with 2-story additions that are of lesser variances required than the existing. We switch to the next page. This is showing the unusual site context. It's in the Linden Lee neighborhood, which is a mature neighborhoods. And there's two side-by-side properties which have side yards that are acting as their rear yard amenity spaces rather than at the back, with very tight spacing at both the front and the back. And it's at the end of a dead-end cul-de-sac. The building to the right, which the two are joined by attached garages, has a similar very small setback at both the front and the back of the house.
Okay.
Next image, please. This site plan indicates the variances required, which have just been delineated. Those are at the front for the two-story addition for a mudroom. Would be as we're asking for a setback of 0.91 meters versus the 4.37 requirement, and that 4.37 requirement comes from the average of the adjacent of the two buildings either side, one of which has a very large setback facing a different direction of the street. So that's skewed the front yard requirement. Then we're asking also for a landing and steps below the ground level of the house to get out to the property of 0 setback from the property line. At the rear, we're asking for a rear yard setback of 0.52 meters versus the 4.64 requirement. And we've set that amount so that it is no closer to the property line than the existing rear yard setback established by the attached garages, which were subject to a minor variance about 5 years ago. And then there's also a reduction in the rear yard area as a result of that setback.
Okay.
We could just very quickly go through the next drawings onto the next, which is just showing that it's very small additions, both front and back, where we've tried to use the minimum amount of space to meet the basic requirements, and that we one of the things we've accomplished is we have submitted for under the mature neighborhoods, the streetscape analysis, and the one area where we were not complying was the existing front entrance was on the side of the house facing the street. So what we've done is make the addition small enough that we've got room for a landing and steps so that the door can now face the street instead of towards the side of the house.
Okay.
I will just skip on to the elevations. So that what we've tried to do is do a design that's in keeping with the existing 100-year-old character of the house and blend more with the existing at the front, because the addition is set back further. And you will see that by virtue of the fact that it no longer projects past the house, it corrects an existing problem where the driveways, which were narrow to begin with, were further pinched by an addition that projected onto the driveway.
Okay.
At the rear of the house, which I think is probably 2 slides on. Yes, we have thank you. No windows facing onto the back of the property, and we have positioned all windows facing only towards the side onto the owner's property rather than the neighbors, so that there isn't overlook. We've also on the back addition used high windows only so that there would not be viewing out to any of the neighboring backyards.
Okay.
And then in summary, we believe it meets the 4 tests. The general intent of the official plan supports residential use, and we believe that we're making some upgrades that respect the neighborhood character and bring the project more into compliance as far as the door location and the setbacks than existing. We believe it meets the general intent of the zoning bylaw in that we are working with a very difficult, tight existing situation where we have a spacious side yard rather than a rear yard, and we're reflecting the typical setbacks of the neighboring house. We believe the variances are minor in nature and in many respects bringing the building closer to compliance in the existing situation. And we believe it's appropriate for development of the lands because it improves the appearance, we believe, and creates a more functional home while respecting the setbacks and the privacy of neighbors.
And just a question, the variance C, the reduced rear yard area. Where is the rear yard on this property?
It would be, we go back to the site plan.
Okay.
Which would be if yes, or I can just describe it. It would be from the closest part of the building to the property line. So that's the distance set by the existing garage wall. So there is actually a larger rear yard. It is the long property line at the back. The depth is set at the garage and at the addition, and then it does widen out significantly into the side yard setback.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I forgot to note there was extensive consultation with the neighbors, the community association, and the councillor, and a number of letters of support were received.
Yes, I noticed that we've received at least 3 letters from neighbors in support of the application. Are there any questions from the members of the committee regarding this application? Ms. McLean, should we tie these variances to the life of the building? Or is that necessary?
I would tie them to the plans,
Just plans filed, okay. So there's no conditions, Ms. Thompson. Building code services obtain permits prior to demolition and proposed construction standard stuff. And hydro, again, their safety offset clearances must be maintained. I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yes.
So you wouldn't object to us tying our approval to the plans filed?
Not at all.
Okay. All in favor of granting this application subject to it being tied to the plans filed? The decision is unanimous. Good luck with your project, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. I do have another hearing later, so I don't know, sometimes I get signed out. So if I could remain on the website, or if I have to sign back in, I just like to make sure that's coordinated.
All right. Well, actually, you're on item 11.
Yes.
And if you want to stay right there, we can adjust the application sequence and just do 11 right now.
Appreciate that.
Yep, not a problem. And here we go again with oh no, wait a second. There is no statutory declaration needed, so you don't have to do it twice. All right. So this application is for 54 Strathcona Avenue. A minor variance to permit a reduced lot width and lot area, a balcony projection, reduced rear and interior side yard setbacks, and to permit a communal area amenity area which consists of no soft landscaping. It is also proposed to construct a 3rd floor addition on the flat roof of an existing 2-story portion at the back of the property to create a self-contained 3rd dwelling unit. Exterior stairs and landings will also be rebuilt with a new flight to the stairs to the 3rd floor. So if you would like to give us a presentation on this.
Okay, thank you. The first image shows the context. It's in the Glebe area close to the Queensway. There's a number of 2- and 3-story buildings, semi-detached and detached on the property. The images, the top right shows the existing situation at the back corner of the property where we're proposing to add a small dormer. And then the image at the bottom left shows the house from the street. There's an entrance down to a garage, which is then recessed under the building. There's a large, at the moment, vacant parking lot that is with a house in behind that. And then the image on the right shows the side of the house. It shows the flat roof to the left where we would be adding the 3rd floor addition. The intention was to leave the front of the house exactly as it is, so there's no impact on the streetscape and to build most of the area on top of the flat roof, but to leave a small bit at the back so that there would be a covered porch as part of a third unit to be added on the ground floor, where there's now just a partial rooming unit. If we move to the next image, the bottom two images, one is taken from at the edge of the neighboring property at the rear, showing kind of an odd situation where there's an underground parking garage and basement that's just slightly above grade. That's includes the required area for amenity space. That's the area that we're talking about finishing with planters and pavers rather than permanent soft landscaping. And that's as a result, there was grass on top of that whole area, which leaked. So that has been removed, and the owners are proposing a more attractive but temporary situation there so that items can be removed in future if leaks occur again. And then at the bottom right corner is an image of the property facing onto the back of this property, which would be the one most affected by the variance application.
Okay.
The next image. This indicates the minor variances required. There are two as a result of the existing lot width and area. And then we are proposing to have a balcony on the third floor on that covered balcony I referred to that is in line with the existing second floor addition. And that's a variance is required because the lot depth is less than 30 meters. There's a small dormer that I mentioned that would be set back 0.45 meters from the side property line versus 1.2 on the back. And then on the third floor, we're proposing a rear yard setback of 3.42 meters versus the 3.82 meters that is required. Although again, this is back in behind the existing setback, rear setback at the ground level. And then the amenity area, I mentioned that we do comply with the required amenity area, but are proposing not to have permanent soft landscaping on that area. And we show in this illustration our proposal for potted plants and then a series of planters along both the back and side of the property, shielding that from the neighbors. And then there's an opening on the side. There's a right of way that provides a required fire escape. I think we could just move on. Perhaps we'll go to the third floor, which would be two images ahead. And that's just showing the layout. We're keeping the existing front of the building, which had 2 bedrooms in it. And then we're proposing it's a less than 800 square foot third apartment with bathroom and open kitchen living, and then that covered porch. We did have consultation with the back neighbor, the owners did, and she didn't have any issues with the project other than she wanted some privacy from the third floor deck. And so in coordination with her, we put a solid 4.5 foot high screen on that so that there won't be any views back and forth. And then we could just quickly run through the building elevations. This is the front that's unchanged, other than we've added a stairway that provides a second deck amenity area as a landing on both the ground and second floor. Mm-hmm. And then the next elevation, this is the side of the house where you see the new stair, the addition, which we're doing in keeping with the existing design so that the addition is concealed within a roof slope, which would be a metal roofing so that it appears in general more like a 2-story building with dormers and the small covered porch, covered deck at the back. And then next we would have the rear elevation showing the stairs and the deck, and then the small dormer to the left. And final elevation is from the side of the property.
The privacy wall built along the extent of that deck is going to be solid board on board?
Yes, that's correct.
And how high?
It's 4 foot 6 inches, which would be about 1.3 or 1.4 meters.
All right. And how deep is that? That in balcony under the roof?
It is about 5 feet, 1.5 meters deep.
Okay. So there's room there for things like a barbecue and chairs.
There would probably just be room for 2 chairs, one on either side. There is currently a barbecue area on the ground floor in the amenity space. So no, there would be no barbecues on upper levels of the building.
Okay. All right.
As far as the 4 tests, we believe that it meets the general intent of the official plan by creating 1 additional unit, which is a modest intensification that respects the existing streetscape, and in this case is built within the existing building footprint, so that we aren't enlarging that in order to get an additional unit. As far as following the general intent of the zoning bylaw, all of the variances requested are either to deal with an existing situation or are coming closer to compliance than the existing setbacks, for example, the rear yard setback and the side yard setback. We believe the variances are minor in that their effect is, as mentioned, not increasing the building envelope or making any of the setbacks more out of the zoning requirements than they currently exist. And we, as mentioned, we've tried to deal with privacy and the neighbors, and we believe having an additional unit is desirable for the neighborhood, and that we've done it in a way that has a minimal impact on the existing community and the design of the existing building, which is really lovely, that we tried to respect.
Okay.
Again, the neighbors have done very thorough consultation and have heard back, have included letters of support for every adjoining property.
Yes, I noticed there's 7 letters of support, or 7 your neighbors, 7 or 8 actually.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Wilder has a question, I believe.
Yeah, just a few questions. You know, I went by the property and I guess I noticed the asphalt at the rear of the property where you're suggesting 0% soft landscaping. And also, I guess I went by too quick. I didn't pick up that the underground parking was with this house, I guess. Can you explain how many so there's underground parking. I guess that was with the original house. I'm wondering how many spaces are under there, and is this for a single car or otherwise? And in the rear, is there a need to keep the asphalt that I noticed there? I mean, cannot that be removed and put in some soft landscaping? And I'm just wondering, so the additional unit, is that under definition of a secondary dwelling unit, or is that part of the household? I mean, in other words, is it the owner that's going to be living in the entire house, that additional unit? Several questions there, sorry.
Okay, I'll start with and it is a very strange parking situation. There's the little piece on the front that looks like it's a small parking garage, and that takes you down a ramp, and the entire property is actually built underground. And so the part you see at the back that looks like asphalt is the roof of the basement parking garage. I have no idea why it was, I think it's been like that for 50 years is my best guess, and no one quite understands why that is there. So that's why there's part of it that's higher on the side, which I think has to do with headroom as you're coming down and then it's about just a few inches above grade, but it is all completely occupied down below. So that's a membrane roofing you're seeing there, and it did have a sod planted on top of it, and there was leaks a couple of years ago. So the owners have just removed all of that and tried to repair the issue with that. There's also not really a spot for drainage because it covers the entire lot. So their solution was to remove all of that and then fix the roof and try to come up with a plan for pavers on top of that, and then planters all around the edge to add some green. There's space for I don't know how many cars, so there would certainly be a parking space for each unit. Some of it doesn't have great headroom, and it's kind of an odd configuration. So some of it's being used as utility room and basement storage. But you probably, if you were determined to, you could put 6 or 7 cars in there as well as having utility space. So it's, yes, truly odd. The other question is we are zoned for a 3-unit building, so it would be a 3-unit building. All the variances are against the requirements for a 3-unit building. The owners would live in one of the units and then rent the other 2.
Great, thank you. Now I understand. So it's going to be, yeah, I understand what the zoning now, of course, is not a secondary dwelling unit. It's 2 additional self-contained units. That's why the staircase, and I couldn't make that out. Okay, staircase in the back. And I guess they'll live on the ground floor and then rent out 2 of the other units. Is that the idea?
I believe they may be on the 2nd floor. They're kind of moving and renovating units as they go. There are 2 legal units there now, and then a very odd situation where there's a door up to 2 bedrooms that looks like it's a separate unit, but doesn't have bathroom or kitchen.
Strange. So. Thank you very much. That's strange. I must admit, when I saw it, I couldn't make heads or tails really of how this thing was designed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Is that any questions from the members for Ms. Thompson regarding this application? I don't believe we have anyone to speak on this. As I said earlier in the sheet, as she mentioned, there are numerous neighbors who are in favor of the application. I'm glad to see that you have an agreement with the owner of 51 Patterson regarding the balcony in the back, because they're going to be very close to the building at 51 Patterson. But that screening, solid wall screening, should definitely help in mitigating any privacy and/or noise impacts from the new unit being proposed. All right. Would just looking here for comments. Standard stuff from Building Code Services: obtain a building permit prior to construction. And once again, hydro clearance from hydro overhead or underground infrastructure easements needs to be maintained. So with that said, all in favor of approving this application, and I think we'll tie this one to plans filed as well, Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor of the application as submitted? Your application is approved. Thank you very much. Have good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Now we'll go to number 10 on the agenda, which is an application at 140 Sussex Drive. And we have Mr. Butler, who is the agent for the applicant. Needs to need to administer the oath.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Do you have video as well, or are you just on audio?
I have a presentation that's been sent in. The coordinator should have that.
All right. Okay, so before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
All right. This application is for minor variances to permit an increase an increased building height, reduce southerly side yard setback, and to permit a staircase to project into the southerly side. It is proposed to demolish the abandoned office building and detached garage and construct a new 3-story building known as the British High Commission and guardhouse. The residence of the High Commissioner and a pool house building will remain on the property. Before we begin, where are you in the site plan process for this project?
We're close to finished. We've responded to all comments. I think this is probably the last step for JC.
So there's no chance of more variances arising through the site plan process? You don't have to come back to us again?
No, doesn't look like it.
All right. And before we begin, does this building have frontage on Sussex Drive?
Not directly. There is a strip of land, NCC has a strip of land between it and Sussex. There's a small strip of land that is hard to determine who owns it, but it's likely the city in the old Dalhousie Street allowance.
Okay. And I guess the other question that arose from one of the members was, is this property being the British High Commission subject to sovereign rights?
Oh, good question.
Because the question is, if you've got sovereign rights, why are you even before us?
Well, even if that was the case, I think that the UK government would want to go through normal approval channels.
All right. Okay. All right. If you'd like to proceed then, Mr. Butler.
All right. Okay, next slide. Just as an orientation slide, I usually use the Houses of Parliament as a orientation. Currently, the UK government is at 80 Elgin Street in an owned building. They have analyzed their properties in Canada, and that particular building at 80 Elgin is no longer suitable for their purposes. It's essentially too big. The way that their activities have changed over the years, it's more room than they need, essentially. So they want to consolidate at Earnscliffe, which is more suitable for how they're doing business these days. Next slide. We'll zoom in here a little bit just to give some context. So Earnscliffe top is slightly left of center. It has some big neighbors. So Global Affairs across the street, National Research Council, which is the property that they actually share an actual property line with, but the only one, and the Interprovincial Bridge coming in on one side. You see at the center of that circle a house. That's the house that's coming down. That's where the new building goes up. And Earnscliffe, of course, out at the point. So this is that consolidation. You can imagine in a post-Brexit world that the consolidation is a renewal of a commitment to the Canadian-UK relationship. They see an opportunity here too to participate in what Sussex Drive has become. But certainly since 1855, the context has changed quite radically. If you look at the bottom left there, down toward Boteler Street, that intersection there is the end of Dalhousie. That would have originally extended right up to the property. And in fact, that curved entry path or entry road into the property is Dalhousie Street, still on the survey. But with the Interprovincial Bridge and the scale of those 100-kilometer-an-hour transportation systems and global affairs, it's a radically different context than it originally was, which gives us a challenge, of course, how to build next to a heritage property like Earnscliffe, but also to participate in the opportunity of Sussex Drive as Confederation Drive. So those are really the two main driving things to balance in this project. Next slide. So just a comparative section here. In 1920, you would have seen, Earnscliffe on the left, The street patterns were different. Of course, there were smaller residential scaled streets. You can see the vertical red lines, the old property lines, much different kind of granularity to the neighborhood, and fairly domestic scale heights going on in 1920. 100 years later, of course, things have been consolidated. That little street you see on the top left, McKay Street, is actually within the property now. Confederation Boulevard, of course, a much larger ceremonial boulevard through. And of course, the scale of GAC has really changed things. So where we show the new build, we really felt this building had a whole new set of obligations to Earnscliffe and indeed the street, and how it dealt with that sort of membrane between what Earnscliffe is now and the new reality of things like GAC across the street. Next slide. This is a view from the river. You can see Foreign Affairs in the background, or GAC, I should say. Note also the tree cover, very heavy tree cover on this property. Earnscliffe, of course, would have been the dominant view from the river at this point, and it's oriented to the river. You'll see that on the site plan. This is a bit of a foreshortened image on the site because of the tree cover. You don't really feel that sort of ominous overlook of GAC. There's so much tree cover on the NCC land in particular. But it does show that that context has changed. Next slide. We went back to, well, in this case, in these drawings, 1929, I think, for the survey, just to look at the old context, the Earnscliffe and the red circles. In the photograph, you can see no bridge yet, no National Research Council yet. And the old lower town there to the right in the picture coming down. And you can see it crosses Sussex. There's some old properties just to the right of the red circle, part of the old residential properties. These show up on the survey. And the survey really became one of our drivers here for how we were looking at the property. Those residential plots are down at the bottom of that survey below the smaller red circle. You can see different numbered lots. I think it's one that's directly below the circle is that building, or a version of that building is still on the site. There's no other buildings around there. That's all morphed into NCC property along Sussex. But you can see Dalhousie Street, right, had ended there. McKay Street, once a public street, is now inboard in the property. And the old Bellevue Terrace is I mean, there's nothing left of that beyond the legal description. That would have been, you can see the road in the photograph. There was actually a road allowance that came up there, but I don't think ever realized. So one of the drivers for us really was, given that the heritage designation included the building and the land, one of our, I guess, self-imposed restrictions was to try to keep all of the new build on the lower half there in the survey of McKay Street. So we stay off the original, as much as we can, off the original property of Earnscliffe, which is what's leading us toward some of these variances. Next slide. Here's Earnscliffe. It was purchased by the UK government in 1930, so it's now been 90 years as the High Commissioner's residence. It's been that longer than it's been anything else, but of course at one point the home and where John A. Macdonald passed away. So it's a Canadian treasure, as it were, and it's been extremely well maintained by the UK government, who extend opportunities for Canadians to see it. Anything from open doors to various other types of events. People have been able to experience it, but home to the High Commissioner. Next slide. This slide on the left, this is the building that's coming down. My colleague there taking a picture of it. If he turned himself around 180, he would see Earnscliffe on the right. This building, it's the UK considers it condemned at the moment. There's various mold and condition issues. We went through it with the city heritage people, of course, and took a close look. We couldn't find any provenance. It's not listed as a heritage building. We did find some of the foundation stones looked original, and maybe some framing members or whatnot, but a lot of the building has been pretty severely altered, and is considered for demolition. You can see just to the right of the pinkish building, there's a small gray garage there. That's also coming down. That's circa 1989 or so. It's not any kind of original building. So we have gone through that whole process with the City of Ottawa's heritage staff, and shared a lot of information back and forth, the information we had, the histories we had. But they feel that it really doesn't retain any value. About half of it is actually an addition, a later addition, but there's little left, I suppose you could say, of the original building. Next slide. So the survey, just to help understand it, you can see up in the top right, that's a pretty long legal description. That's the remnants of all these residential properties. You can see on the right-hand side there along Sussex, a lot of those original lots. There's really not much left on them. There's a small portion of foundation on one of them that actually comes into the property. But other than that, there's really nothing left of those. They're not really, and one thing that's really one of our drivers is they're not really perceived, right? Sussex Drive and this sort of skewed property line, this jagged property line, are not things you perceive on site as such, right? It's the legal instrument. You can see the two vertical lines going through the middle. That was the old McKay Street alignment, now internal to the building. Just to sort of point out those lot lines are all still there from way back when. Next slide. This is a little clearer, a little easier to see. Just showing the various buildings. Earnscliffe at an angle there in the middle. The existing building to the right and the small garage I mentioned. There's a tiny pool house up in the top left-hand side. That's all the buildings on the site. You can see the NRC parking above. That is that one shared property line, the Ottawa River at the bottom. You can see it's a little faint, but you can see a few lines kind of between the two houses toward the bank. These are the geotechnical setbacks. We determined top of stable bank, and these provided a setback from a geotechnical perspective. That was one of our limiting factors as well. So what we were trying to do is say, all right, we're going to stick to the right of McKay Avenue, of course, within the property lines and above those geotechnical requirements. So our site, although the overall site is quite large, in deference to Earnscliffe, we're trying to keep our new build on the right-hand side here, snug it up to the property line and align it with McKay Street as a kind of datum, as it were, and participate actually in Sussex Drive, which is how we've come up with the massing. Next slide. So the proposed building fits on this side of, I call it McKay, but I guess it's now Earnscliffe Avenue down the middle. It's a 2-story building toward Earnscliffe, 3 stories to the right towards Sussex. A lot of bedrock. We hit bedrock something like 18 inches, 2 feet down, depending where we are. So there's no subgrade parking. We don't want to be drilling or using explosives next to Earnscliffe or near the river for that matter. And so it becomes a little clearer as you see some of the images, but the fire route comes down McKay Avenue. The main entrance we did want toward Earnscliffe, that's shared. And I will say it's a fairly private building. It's not much of a public building anymore. A lot of what you do in the consular world is online these days, if you're renewing your passport or this sort of thing. So they don't have that many day-to-day visitors for that sort of thing anymore. At the very top, there's a guardhouse and a sally port. When you come in that curved entrance road, you would go through a sally port just for their security. So as an embassy building, of course, it has pretty high security requirements. So we've also On the NCC land to the right here between the building and Sussex, we've completely redesigned some of the landscaping there for security. What that does is it just vehicle blocking essentially. So vehicles can't get close to the building, which gives us a big security advantage. We have approval from NCC for that land. Incidentally, NCC does not have jurisdiction on the building itself because it's not federal land or a federal building. But we did work with them on the landscaping. We've slightly reoriented the path to the right and added some features for security, but also some public amenity there. There's a few places for public art. There's a few places where there's furniture, street furniture. So we've tried to enhance the landscaping there, both for security and in respect for the open space zoning that's in place here. I will also say that they're developing a legal instrument, a covenant of sorts for that property, so it won't change. So it will maintain that security aspect. That was fairly critical. If we're going to do some security aspects on the NCC land, it has to remain in forever, in perpetuity, really, to protect the building. So that land has been slightly redesigned, and it's not going to change. Is the idea. Next slide. So the elevations, essentially what we had worked out with the heritage, the city's heritage people was, given the tight site, the best way to kind of deal with a heritage property like Earnscliffe at 2.5 stories was to move some of the massing toward Sussex. So the top elevation there, you can see is the 3-story building. So that block is toward Sussex, and the lower 2-story block on the right, on the upper part, is toward Earnscliffe. So that in the upper elevation, Earnscliffe would be on your right. Now these images are a little bit artificial in that none of the tree cover is shown. That 3-story building, I'd be surprised if you could see any of it from Sussex in the summer. You can see more in the winter when the leaves are down, but it's heavily treed, and we've actually increased the trees on the NCC land for even more cover. On the top elevation, you can see a stair and a property line on the left. That's the stair that is pushing into the a little bit into the usual 1 meter setback. So that's one of the variances we're looking for. That stair goes up to an elevated terrace. It's for fire code to get people off that terrace. They're likely to have more than 60 people, and it's essentially a fire code issue. So that's one of the variances. You can see the yellow dashed line would be the 11 meters expected. We've popped up above that towards Sussex, trying to get some elevation towards Sussex for Confederation Boulevard, essentially, and also to have a drop down to the right toward Earnscliffe. The penthouse, the mechanical penthouse, pops up a little bit more, but we've set it back as far as we can from all parapets. So there's few places around this building where you'll see it. You would probably see it if you're elevated from the site, or possibly from the bridge. The Urban Design Review panel commented on the penthouse, so we changed the color of it, and we managed to re-engineer quite a bit of it to get it a little bit lower. They were thinking about the Confederation building, Confederation Bridge, or I should say interprovincial bridge view of the building. While fleeting, you're moving pretty quick on the bridge. There is an opportunity for a view, or for a pedestrian or a cyclist on the bridge. The lower elevation is really from another artificial one. This is in heavy tree cover, but from the river side. So in this case, Earnscliffe is to your left. And so you can see the massing building up toward the right, the Sussex. And again, that same set of stairs that we're seeking a variance for. And you'll see it in some other later images, but the building is attempting to be a pretty quiet building in some ways toward Earnscliffe. The material palette is pulled off of Earnscliffe. There's white ceramic panels and real quarried limestone at the base there in sympathy to the materials of Earnscliffe. But trying to do a fairly quiet elevation toward it that drops down. We can go to the next slide. So the longer elevations stretch out along that old McKay lane. So from an urban design perspective or between buildings, what we're trying to do is have a datum that holds that last urban remnant of the street pattern solid. The trick is to, if you can, even enhance the experience of Earnscliffe, which was always a little bit separate, right? That was a bigger lot at the end of the old pattern. It had heavy tree cover, and it was oriented toward the river. So in a way, we've made it even more private. So when you arrive at this address, you could rarely see Earnscliffe itself. You could see portions of that old building. But now the experience is you will arrive at this building, and as you come in through the entrance, you'll discover Earnscliffe if you go down that particular drive. So it has I'd say a kind of protective role. At the same time, it sort of becomes the address for Sussex to try to at least hold its own on a street with some very large buildings. Down below, the lower elevation here, no one's ever going to see this, but you can see in the lower gray stone panel on the left, those two stairs coming down. That's the stair that's extending into the side yard. I have some images that'll show better how the trees work with that, but this is the Sussex elevation. I think the third floor will really be in the treetops, but where you'll actually get a view of it is closer to the guardhouse because there's an opening in the trees where that road is. It'll become a little clearer with some of the images. So let's try that, the next slide. This is, an eagle view, a pigeon view, if you will, that no one will see, but it helps understand how things are working. So the building to the left, this is an old image, so that mechanical penthouse is a little smaller and white now to disappear a little more. You can see that kind of hard line along the street that just kind of sets up a datum for the more bucolic or casual layout of Earnscliffe itself, which is a house on a promontory. Really, it's toward the river, and it ends up being a kind of splayed site organization where there's kind of a center point of a radius down a little bit off the property that the buildings splay out if you include the pool house. But you can see the third floor there in the trees. Some of the grade along that side actually comes up and buries some of that garage at the lower level, that stone base. But I'm hoping there's some opportunities to see some of that building through the tree cover. Next slide. This is almost the bridge view, although it's a bit high to be the bridge view. You'd be a little lower for this. But to give a sense that Earnscliffe still holds its promontory on the river, holds its importance there. The new building is holding Sussex and acts as a foil to the new building, and hopefully has some participation. And this, the guys can't model the trees perfectly, but this is actually pretty close, as you saw from that photograph from the river. Next slide. A more, I guess, photorealistic image here. So in this image, Earnscliffe is off to the left. And we've broken the building down in these different masses that are not too much bigger. It helps a relatively small building. We're under 2,000 square meters. Break its massing down even further. So there's a relatively small elevation toward Earnscliffe. As you can see on the right, as we get towards Sussex, we've also placed all the amenity away from Earnscliffe. We've worked to have some of the amenity for staff away from Earnscliffe up on that terrace. There's about 60 people working here, if it's full. So we want to keep them on this side of the property. Next slide. So if we're up in that terrace, now you can catch a little bit of Earnscliffe there to the left. So they're kind of lined up but splayed at the river. A little more of the glazing of the new building is toward the river and not toward Earnscliffe. So they kind of take their own viewpoints, if you will, out to the river. Next slide. That's the, I mean, this is developed a little bit since, but fairly clean facade toward Earnscliffe, but it was fairly important to us to have the entry lobby here, so that you come down that road and you would go right to the residence, you'd go left into this new building. So that the buildings face each other in that sense. Their entrances are not too far apart. You don't feel like you go around Earnscliffe to get into it. You arrive at both buildings. There is tree cover and whatnot to the left here between the two. So you really arrive at this building, but the front of Earnscliffe is not so far. And again, a fairly quiet facade. You can see between the lobby on the right and the gray block to the left where somebody is standing. That's a drive into the main door of the garage. So that in and out of daily traffic for the garage is tucked away, and it's not near the High Commissioner's residence. Next slide. Just another view. This is after we've come in. The guardhouse is just to our left, and this is probably the one place where you will see a little bit of facade, where you can see the coat of arms. That would probably be visible from the entrance drive. And to the right is the property for Earnscliffe. That looping road is the original one. You'll see that dating way back in any aerial photo you can see. So that's all maintained on the Earnscliffe side to keep it as close as we can to its original condition. I think there may be one more slide. Can maybe check? Oh, okay, well, this was one of our Sussex views. And you know, I asked the guys to make sure that the tree heights were correct. In the winter, of course, without the foliage, you'll be aware of the building. In the summer, it's a little trickier. I think as you move down the street a little further to the left, you'll start to see a bit more of the facade. But we did want to maintain the trees, and in fact, we extended them further with extensive landscaping here. So it's a little bit of a landscaping moment as well, right? So having invested in those security portions, we sort of up the landscape and the presence from Sussex. That might be my last one. Let's try one more. I think that's probably it. Yeah, that's it. I think what we've tried to do really is mitigate the impact of the variances. So the side yard setback, we think, really helped us maintain the original footprint. So we're not taking out a lot of vegetation. We lined it up with where the original building was. So when that building is demolished, we're not taking out any more trees or landscaping. There's a lot of asphalt in front of that with that other little garage. So that helped us mitigate the impact of the new build. So I think the impact of the relaxation for the height has been positive for us. And I think we've mitigated the side yard setbacks, I think I would say. I think it's an appropriate use of the property. It's zoned and expected to be an embassy or consular, or in this case, a high commission. That's the expectation, I think, for even in the NCC's plans as well of the types of things that happened on the ceremonial route. You know, the open space aspect, again, where we've put it has limited the impact on the private site, and we've done quite a bit on the NCC lands to add more trees. We've added certainly more trees than we've had to take out, but we haven't had to take out very many, 2 or 3 of size. We've done full consultations. The British High Commissioner herself had the councillors and the business groups and the community members in, heritage people. So we've gone through all of that. with full consultation, and we've worked with the heritage people from the beginning, actually, from the city. Sally Coots, who I think is now retired, if I'm not mistaken, but
she is.
Yeah, terrific working with Sally.
So
And I think
estimation this meets all four tests that we're having to deal with to determine whether or not we're going to approve this.
Well, I believe so. I think the height has been a positive impact. If you consider the heritage building, that was the intent. I think I was saying earlier, the way the property line works is really quite artificial in a sense that it's not something you realize or perceive. It's when you're on that sidewalk, right? It's a leftover legal instrument. So I think going into the yards, we can't even see the building, let alone the encroachment in the side of the building. But it does allow us to build it on a pretty tight site. I think I said it was a self-imposed restriction, but I think that's really it's really where the heritage people wanted to go. And in fact, I think it was Sally who suggested the variances in the first place. And I think it's appropriate that way. It's an embassy. It's a consular space. We've used very high quality materials for the facade. So it's intended to take its place with some important buildings on Confederation Boulevard.
You don't figure the lot setback is a problem at all. You've integrated this building quite nicely into the grounds. It's not really going to be an issue.
I don't think so. There literally there can't be neighbors with the instrument,
yeah, exactly.
Right?
And in your estimation, this project is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land?
Yeah, we looked at both the sort of the open space and then the subset. It is intended for consular activity, so I think that's appropriate. I think it's desirable for a number of reasons, partly for the intent of Confederation Boulevard, but also that aspect of what Earnscliffe is now. So it has that protective function. The consolidation on the one piece of land gives Earnscliffe a new kind of role in the whole British presence, I think, in Ottawa. So the new building, I hope, gives it a new kind of life and a long one.
And in your estimation, the variances are minor?
Yes, the height. The height in particular, given what has grown up around the building, I think the height is actually desirable. If you remember that that section, trying to deal with global affairs across the street, I think that obligation to try to mitigate that, the height has actually helped us in that case. Helped us move mass away from Earnscliffe, but also deal with Sussex.
And you'd argue that this meets the intent and purpose of both the official plan and the zoning bylaw?
Absolutely, it's zoned for an embassy. And like I say, we've done as much mitigation as I think we can in terms of open space and park space. First, by minimizing the impact on what was already there by using the old asphalt spaces and buildings, but also the enhancements on the NCC property.
Okay. I think Ms. McLean had a question.
Just had a question for planning. If this property doesn't front a public street, is development allowed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to my understanding was that it's an oddly shaped lot, and there's a portion that technically abuts Sussex Drive, which is like very narrow. So given that that's sort of, it's kind of moves into the bigger portion, then technically it does abut a street, so development is permitted.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Mr. Butler. A very thorough presentation. And the images certainly help, and the cross section and the maps. Any other questions from the members of the committee? Ms. Oak-Sharon.
Curious if you're going to keep the red telephone booth.
Yes, in fact, I think we're going to give it pride of place. The landscape architect wants to put it outside the gate.
You're going to put a statue of Doctor Who beside it?
Yes. Yep. There is. Yeah.
There's an opportunity for a photo op for a lot of visitors.
Yeah, more than one person was called the building the TARDIS. So I've
Yeah. I wouldn't doubt it. All right. Are we prepared to vote on this application for variance? I'm certainly in favor. Ladies and gentlemen. All right. Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the agenda. So we are adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, on the committee and the public for participating in this hearing. And I guess we're going to be joined up